guardians of the children, and more info on our anti-bullying theme. All that and more coming up next on Joy in the City True Stories. Joy in the City is a program highlighting people and organizations having an impact in our city. All too often, we hear about the problems and dysfunction in our culture. But we are coming with a different approach as we take a look at all the good things going on right here in our community. I'm Bethany Marshall, and you are about to see what God is doing in our city. We want to thank our program sponsors, Park Home, for the donation of furniture used in our studio, Taylor Design and Events for beautifully decorating our studio space, and our platinum sponsor, Harry's Construction, for their ongoing support of Joy in the City. The mission of the organization Guardians of the Children is to serve as advocates, to provide strength and stability to families in crisis, to recognize and react to child abuse, and to be the answer to the prayer of the abused child or teen. Recently, we sat down with Lisa Shaffer as she shared her heart with us.
Well, first of all, thank you for coming by today, hanging out with me for a few minutes. And we're going to talk about Guardians of the Children. What is Guardians of the Children?
Well, thank you for having us today. Guardians of the Children, we are a 501c3 dedicated to helping recognize and react to child abuse and violence and bullying. We were founded in San Antonio, Texas in 2006, and now we are spread across the United States and in Canada.
Wow. So in our local area, what do you guys do to make that happen?
We do awareness events. We try to get out in the public as much as possible to let people know that these things are important issues, that our children are being abused and bullied. A lot of places they try to turn a blind eye to the bullying, which is a huge problem these days for the children. So we actually, if we find a case that we feel we can help a child, whether it be an abuse case or a bullying case, we actually will write in the whole chapter. We do what we call an adoption, and they get a vest like ours, they get a road name, and they get assigned 2 of us as their primary contacts. With the primary contacts, they can call those people 24/7, and if they need us, we will write in however many we feel needs to be. If it's the whole chapter we'll get on the bikes and ride. Part of our motto is, when a child calls, we ride, and that's exactly what we do, day or night. We've gotten the 2 o'clock phone calls in the morning, and I need you, and we go.
Wow.
Whatever it takes to make the children feel safe. We escort the children to court if they are going up against their perpetrators, to make sure that their perpetrators are put away so they can't hurt anyone else. We will go to court with them, shield them from any type of, if the reporters or anyone's outside, we shield the children from them. And also inside the courthouse, we keep the kids away from the perpetrator's family or anyone who might try to intimidate the child. A lot of times, me as the child liaison, I know the child's story, but a lot of times our members might even not know their whole story of why we are in their life. They just know this child needs us, and that's enough for them. So when we go into court, it might be the first time our members even hear the child's story. So the child feels that it's a safe place for them. They're not being judged by anything or anyone, and we're just there as their brothers and sisters to make sure that they can get out of that darkness that they have been in.
Wow. So, by the way, you're dressed, and you mentioned riding. So for anybody that's watching that's not familiar with what those would indicate, talk about that aspect of this.
We are a motorcycle enthusiast group. We all ride. It's part of the mandate to be a patched member. And as far as patched member, I mean a full-fledged guardian. You go through Interpol background checks. We make sure our people are worthy of being in contact with these children. It's always 2 of us. You will never see, you might see one of us out riding by, but usually we're going to meet the rest of our family. It's not very often you'll see just one, and the kids will never. We are always at least 2 strong. It protects us, it protects the kids, and it's just it's a good thing to do, and that's, from our home chapter, that's a thing we have to do. Even when we talk to our kids on the phones or messaging them, we are always too strong. So we do everything in group. And we ride everywhere. Doesn't matter the weather. If a child calls, we're on the bikes and riding. So it gets cold. But
I think one of the things that's amazing with this, even though you have this this side, there's such a love and compassion for children that is kind of the core of what you do. And I know, talking to some of your members, it's amazing to see that. And I assume that you mentioned that's something that everyone who comes to be a part of your group, that is somewhat part of their DNA, as part of who they are.
It has to be. I mean, we are guardians 24/7. Like there's not an off switch. And it's, as far as the motorcycle, the biker image, we are not an MC. We are an organization of people that just like to ride the bikes. Our passion is helping the kids. The bikes help us get that link, because when you pull in 15 bikes strong, a child looks at that and these big bad bikers are coming to protect me. I got this. And you can just almost see that weight lift off their shoulders. Like, these people are going to do everything they can to protect me. I can do this, and it kind of gives them that extra little drive to tell their story, or to stand up to that bully and fix the problem that's there. And it's quite amazing when you put their vests on them. Even you can almost see them poof up, like, okay, now I'm one of them. And it's that whole biker image that a lot of times drives these kids to make it through whatever they're going through.
So bullying, we know, is a very a very big issue in the country, in the world, even in our area. What are some of the things that you, maybe examples without names obviously, but some examples of some of the things that you've done to get involved in a situation?
Sure. We've had children that have been or being bullied in school. We'll pick them up in the morning. We'll put them on a bike. We'll drive them to school on the bikes. I think we had the last one that we took to school, there was about 6 or 7 bikes. We took him right up to the doors of the school, and we talked to the principal. We talked to his teacher. This is we call them little G's or little guardians. And we just want to know what's going on here. What can we do to help? We have put on assemblies. We have a whole slideshow presentation and a little thing that we do for assemblies for anti-bullying. We also have good touch, bad touch, stranger danger programs that we have put on in schools. And it's just a matter of letting people know, hey, this child's one of ours, and he's got a lot of big brothers and sisters behind him. You might not want to pick on him. And we also try to connect to the bullies, find out what's going on in their life, that they're so aggressive and they're trying to bully other people. And sometimes we've even pulled in bullies and mentored them a little bit to get them on their right path and realize that that's not the way to get the attention and be known. So we try to work at it as both angles because both sides need help.
Indeed.
So,
from someone who is being a bully, obviously there's different things of insecurity and so forth. What's something that you would say to a kid that has typically been a bully? How do you get them to change that mentality?
A lot of times we find with a bully, there's issues at home. And so we ask, if I was to come up to a bully and try to talk with them, my first thing is why do you feel it's okay for you to do this? And how would you feel if somebody is doing it to you? Or is somebody doing it to you that you are projecting it onto another? And from that, I get the feel of, is this something going on at home? Is it big brother's bullying him and he's projecting it? And then we just kind of go from that angle to see where we need to go with the child. Every case is different, but usually with those general questions, you can get an angle of where you need to go with it.
So let me ask you, you're a little younger. Mm-hmm. What's your role in all this? Why did you get involved?
I was actually a little guardian myself. I was adopted in after being sexually abused by my stepfather. And then when I turned 18, I just felt that it was sort of my responsibility to step up and help other kids who've gone through similar things as me.
With Mac's case, she can relate so much to the other children that we bring in. She can say, hey, we never say, I know how you feel, because we don't. You can go through the same experience and not have the same outtake from it. But she can say, when I went through it, this is how I felt. And the kids relate so much to that. And having somebody younger, it's amazing how she's been a godsend for us. I mean, we were there for her, and she's been there for so many other kids already. And we have, at this time, 2 other little guardians who are now patch members and helping others. So I feel that it is a family, and they don't want to leave. So the next best thing is start helping.
That's awesome. I think it's amazing what you do, and I'm sure you come up against some stories that are just heartbreaking. Probably almost every story is heartbreaking in its own way. And so we'll just pray that God just intervenes in these situations in any way possible. Thank you for stopping by. Come and chat with me for a few minutes today.
Thank you for having us.
Appreciate it.
If you know a person or organization impacting our city, we want to hear about it. You can contact us at 814-944-1948 or by email at stories@joyinthecity.org.
Today's Platinum sponsor is Harry's Construction, whose motto is, if you can dream it, we can create it. Thanks again to Harry Halk and the team for supporting Joy in the City.
As we continue our month's theme on anti-bullying, we are coming from a different perspective on bullying. Let's take a look at Troy Ferguson's conversation with Mary Ellen Smith on bullying from a different perspective.
Well, Mary, thank you for joining with me for a few moments today.
Not a problem, not a problem.
We're doing a series on bullying, and today's going to be from a different perspective. We've had a few discussions already from people who were bullied in school, and even as adults, have experienced some things with bullying. So the perspective from you, you shared with me a little bit when we first started talking about the story. You talked about the perspective from being a bully. So as we begin, tell me, in what ways were you a bully?
I was actually thinking when we were talking a few different times where young in my life I was just very standoffish. If you said something the wrong way, you did this, you did that, it set me off a certain way. I wasn't afraid to stand up for myself. And it was sort of the way I was raised. But it was a lot more, I saw myself, especially my ninth grade year, my 10th grade year, I ended up getting expelled from school because of those problems. So it really brought everything to a head. And when we started talking, I'm like, oh, well, that might have been me.
So what, give me some examples, if you can, of what are some of the things that you would do or say that got you in trouble?
I actually was expelled from high school for verbally abusing a teacher. That was one of the several things I did. I would get up and leave the classroom, roam the hallways, and there was one teacher in particular, her and I did not get along. And I think it was a lot of the authoritative figure. I've never been real good with authority, but I had no respect. And I would go in the classroom almost taunting, and it got to the point where if I would get set off enough, I would say whatever I said, leave, and I actually ended up leaving the school the one time, and the assistant principal grabbed me, pulled me back in, I ended up punching him. So everything led up to so much anger that the school had no idea what else to do with me.
And how was that taken out on other students, not just teachers, but other students?
Not so much like during the time that I was being expelled from school in that year. It wasn't so much students, like I would pick on kids or say certain things, but it was a lot more of the authoritative figures. Anybody that was bigger than me, had more to say than me, I had a problem with. It wasn't until we were, I moved and the school had put me in an alternative education program. And I did pretty well for the most part, did what I had to do to get by. And one day a kid said something to me and set me off and called me a few choice words, and I ended up punching him and breaking his nose. So it was one of those, a lot of anger issues, I think, is what stemmed a lot of my experience as the bully.
Okay, so that would go to my next question. Why were you, or why is someone a bully? So you had some anger issues that quickly presented themselves in the manner of bullying a teacher, students, whatever it was.
And I would say it still does a little bit. I'm definitely not the person I was before. Would never get to where I'm at today if that was the case. But there was a lot of underlying things that went on during those times that, you know, a lot of times people will say, I gotta cut. I can't do this. I think a lot of it had to do with, there was a lot of changes going on household-wise at the time. Even I lost my best friend in the same year. So it was a lot of anger towards that, not being able to, I guess, grieve properly. And it turned into anger, turned into I guess the right word would be a hellion. Like, I didn't want to be around. And I found the easiest way was to lash out. It was the way people listened, the way people responded. It helped me get out what I wanted to say, and sometimes I didn't have to use words.
Understood. How was some of that behavior back then, how does that affect you even today?
A lot of the kids I went to school with, I'll see them now. We've remained mutual friends through Facebook or through some sort of social media. And it's very hard to sometimes distinguish where I'm at now compared to who I was back then. Because a lot of those same friends are like, oh, you did this back then. And it's like, okay, yeah, that was me then. That's not me now. Like, I've worked through a whole lot of years of hell to get to where I'm at. And for me, like, getting a hold of those things that were triggering me at the time and sending me overboard and learning different ways to cope with them really made the difference to where I'm at now.
What is something that you regret the most?
I would have to say my biggest regret would be the way that I acted during those years. If I could go back and rewind and get my age 12 to age 18 back in order, I think that would be the biggest thing. Like, if I was allowed to know now and go back then, I would have made a complete change. I didn't get to graduate school. School district looked at me and told me I wasn't going to amount to anything, to get out and just move on. I've proved them wrong, obviously, with everything that I've done, but it was just that point of even that authority gave up on me. So I would have to say that I would love to redo those years, and I'd love to graduate school. I'd love to walk across, get my diploma, get to be where the rest of my friends got to have all that fun thing, and I didn't get to do it, but that was my own fault.
If someone who today is feeling similarly to the way you felt between the ages of 12 and 18, what is something that you would like to say to them today that might change their behavior, change their mentality of certain things?
I would have to say at this point in time, again, knowing what I know now, it would be, don't be afraid to ask for help. That was the hardest thing, was trying to voice my concerns and my opinions, and they didn't get answered. And there was a lot of things that happened during that time with agencies and everything else, and they weren't as advanced as they are now. And if there's any sort of underlying condition, anything that somebody's suffering with, the doors are wide open now compared to where they were 10, 15, 20 years ago. And mental health wasn't a thing back then. And I have to say that was a lot of what my issues were, was my mental health went to pot, and it just wasn't where it's at now. So I would have to say, if there's any help that, if you're afraid to ask for it, even asking a friend, it makes a world of difference.
So we hear about how you were as a kid, a teenager, some of the things you went through, getting expelled from school. Years later, even though life isn't perfect, things have significantly improved, and what you're doing now as a job, I think, is amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do now?
I'm actually working in a school with special needs children. I wake up in the morning, I'm super excited to go. It's always a new experience. You never know what kind of behavior might happen during the day, what you might be getting yourself into, and it's really, it changes my whole attitude every day. Even if I'm having a bad day, there's one kid in particular that he'll just come with a smile on his face, and it's just one of those things that just makes you not feel as bad as you did. And it's one of the best things about being there and leaving at the end of the day. Sometimes they don't want to go home. So you have that almost sense of need. And that's completely different than anything that I've experienced.
Wow, I think it's amazing what you're doing. I think it's so cool, and it's a needed thing in any community. I appreciate that you're taking on that call to do that. And listen, I know this isn't easy talking about some of this stuff, but I really appreciate you being vulnerable and honest and taking a few minutes with me today. Thank you.
It's not a problem. Thank you.
To wrap up today's show, Troy Ferguson shares a few final thoughts.
At times, we put so much thought and effort into things that just don't matter, myself included. You see, I have spent hours looking for images and such to represent an event that was being promoted, and for the most part, the image was background and not even noticed. But the experience that generated this whole thought was a conversation I overheard recently about forgiveness based on the scripture in Matthew 18. Let's talk about that. The story tells us that Peter asked Jesus, "Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times?" Now, the response to this from Jesus was caused controversy. You see, some translations say not 7 times, but 70 times 7. Other translations say 77 times. I've heard people lose their mind over this, saying things like, the original language says 70 times 7, so all other translations of the Bible are inaccurate. The factual answer is, we don't know. There's even debate of what the original Greek says. But the point isn't the number of 77 versus 490. The point is we should not put a limit on our times of forgiveness. You see, if you are the type of person who can get so hung up on a detail of something that just doesn't matter, we need to recognize that we can see that and we need to let it go. My wife is a great one to tell me when to let this or that go. She'll say, "You're putting too much time into this detail and nobody will even notice." Perhaps you need someone like my wife around you who can be honest and say, "Don't get caught up in the details that just don't really matter." I believe for us to grow into our dream journey, we need to be able to release things that become stumbling blocks on our path. Just like the story of forgiveness, look at the principle being established and not get stuck on a word or two that changes our perspective. Now, go and have a blessed week.
That's all the time we have today. Thanks for watching Join the City True Stories. Let me encourage you to watch other episodes of people and organizations having an impact in our community on ABC 23 at 5:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. every Sunday. You can also catch us each week on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Until then, be encouraged because God is moving in our city.
God is on the